beneath skies older than memory, where nights stretched endless and stars whispered their silent constellations. There were wanderers who carried a fragile yet eternal duty, guarding flame against the encroaching dark, keepers of warmth within the vast embrace of shadow. Their journey was not marked by conquest or triumph, but by the quiet patience of fire tended, breath coaxed into ember, and light held gently within hands that understood its sacred weight, as though each spark carried the heart of the world itself. The wanderers moved quietly through a valley where night still clung to every ridge, their boots pressing softly into frost-touched grass, while the cold air carried the faint scent of pine resin. Smoke and earth settling gently in their lungs with each careful breath. Above them, stars hung like scattered lanterns, pale and patient, their faint light brushing the hills and distant trees, while the wind stirred lightly through the branches, bringing a soft susurration that whispered over the land as if the night itself were breathing. A small flame flickered in the distance, suspended atop a stone circle, and the wanderers approached, feeling warmth seep into their chilled hands as they knelt beside the fire, inhaling the subtle aroma of burning wood, mingled with cold air and the lingering scent of moss. The first wanderer traced a hand over rough stones, smooth from years of touch and weather, feeling faint traces of warmth captured from the fire and sun alike. A quiet reminder that even the smallest ember could hold memory, life, and presence against encroaching darkness. Their companion arranged kindling with deliberate care, fingers brushing the rough bark and brittle twigs, sensing the soft give of each piece as it settled into place. And the fire seemed to respond with gentle flickers, stretching its light across the moss-striped stones and long shadows of the valley. The night pressed softly against the hills, cool and patient, carrying with it the scent of distant smoke and the faint sweetness of frost-kissed pine needles. And the wanderers inhaled, allowing the delicate, ephemeral perfume to settle across skin and clothing, mingling with the warmth of fire on their cheeks. Above, a faint moon rose slowly, pale and deliberate, casting silver shadows across the hills, touching the firelight with contrast. And the wanderers felt the stillness of the night wrap around them, a quiet, watchful companion that bore witness to every careful movement and gentle breath. They tended the fire with quiet devotion, adding slender twigs and lifting a small stone to redirect heat, inhaling the faintly smoky scent mingled with moss and frost, while the soft crackle of flames created a rhythm that echoed the gentle, deliberate pulse of their own hearts. The first wanderer leaned closer to watch the fire surface, noting the way light danced on each curling ember, and felt the faint, comforting heat brush their face while inhaling the mingled scent of charred pine, cold stone, and distant earth, a sensory memory woven into the night itself. A distant owl hooted once, a slow, resonant note that rolled across the ridges, and the wanderers paused to listen, letting the vibration of sound and air settle into their bones, feeling a patient acknowledgement that life persisted quietly in shadowed hollows, trees, and the unseen corners of the night. Around them, the valley was a soft tapestry of shadow and light, each stone, ridge, and tree brushed by fire's warmth and moonlight. And the wanderers moved with gentle reverence, feeling the texture of frost on grass, the smooth resistance of stones, and the soft pressure of moss under gloved fingers. They knelt beside the fire, adjusting small branches with tender care, feeling the subtle shift of heat and the faint fragrance of burning pine. And as smoke spiraled upward into the night, the wanderers observed its motion, inhaling the mixture of warmth, air, and distant earth that seemed to carry memory. The second wanderer lifted a twig, feeling its brittle texture and faint moisture from night's frost, and carefully placed it on the flame, watching it ignite with soft, deliberate movement, a small, quiet act that echoed across the valley as a gesture of devotion and continuity. Above, stars moved slowly in their ancient patterns, pale points tracing invisible lines, and the wanderers felt a subtle kinship. a quiet resonance with the eternal rhythm of night, as if each flicker of their fire was mirrored by distant, celestial flames guiding a patient, unseen choreography. They traced fingers along the edge of the stone circle, feeling uneven surfaces and smooth edges worn by hands long vanished. Inhaling the faint scent of moss and char. Sensing in these tactile connections the careful passage of time. And how light, once tended, could anchor presence even in enduring darkness. The night deepened, and shadows thickened with patient subtlety, brushing across the valley floor and hillsides while the wanderers adjusted their positions. Feeling the warmth of fire seep slowly through clothing, brushing cheeks and hands, a tender, persistent contrast to the cool, expansive night surrounding them. A small fox passed silently along a distant ridge, its fur brushing dew-laden grass, and the wanderers watched without motion, noting the grace and attentiveness of its movement, sensing the quiet life that thrived in spaces between flame and shadow, in every subtle crease of the valley and fold of the hills. They inhaled the mingled scent of smoke, pine, earth, and faint frost, letting the fragrance settle across shoulders, hair, and skin, and the first wanderer ran gloved hands along a smooth stone, feeling the faint pulse of warmth left from sunlight and fire, a reminder that light existed both in flame and memory. The fire flared gently as the second wanderer adjusted a twig, and in the subtle hiss and curl of smoke, they felt the rhythm of vigilance, the slow, deliberate work of sustaining flame, a quiet meditation performed in the dark with hands, breath, and patient attention to small movements of energy and light. The first wanderer watched shadows dance across moss and stone, noting the interplay of fire and moonlight, and felt the soft pressure of cool night air on skin, carrying faint scents of distant earth and forest, a sensory reminder that their presence, however small, was entwined with the patient rhythm of the world. Around them, the valley hummed softly with life that moved unseen, the murmur of distant water, the faint rustle of hidden creatures, and the patient sway of branches in the wind, and the wanderers inhaled slowly, letting the subtle sounds, textures, and scents form a delicate tapestry to accompany the fire's quiet illumination. They adjusted small stones to redirect heat, fingers brushing rough surfaces and smooth edges alike, inhaling the mingled scent of wood smoke, moss, and frost, while the first wanderer tilted head to the sky, noting the slow drift of stars, faint and constant, as if mirroring the patient, enduring vigilance of their own hands. The second wanderer knelt beside a patch of moss, feeling the cool, soft surface, and allowed the warmth of the fire to brush against cheeks and hands, inhaling its faintly sweet smoke and the subtle aroma of pine and earth. A quiet communion of elements and senses, bridging night, flame, and presence. The fire settled into a soft rhythm, glowing warmly against the patient night. And the wanderers observed, hands poised, inhaling deeply, sensing the delicate balance of heat, light, shadow, and air. A quiet meditation that anchored them to the valley and the small, persistent act of sustaining illumination. A soft breeze stirred the valley, brushing hair, clothing, and the fire's smoke with delicate insistence, carrying with it the faint scent of distant pine, frost, and earth. And the wanderers breathed in tandem with the wind, a slow, deliberate alignment of presence, patience, and quiet vigilance in the enveloping night. They tended the final small branches of kindling, observing each spark, curl of smoke, and flicker of flame. And the first wanderer felt the warmth brush cheeks and hands, while the second inhaled deeply, letting the combined scent of smoke, moss, and frost form a quiet, sensory anchor within the deep, patient darkness. And so, the firekeepers remained, kneeling beside their fragile flame in the valley, each movement deliberate, each breath slow and attuned, holding a small, luminous sanctuary against endless night, a quiet memory woven in smoke, warmth, and attentive hands, where presence, patience, and light persisted beyond the vast, patient dark. The wanderers rose as pale light began to touch the distant ridges, brushing frost-covered grass and stones with soft, silvery radiance. And the cool air pressed lightly against their skin, carrying the delicate scent of pine, earth, and lingering smoke from last night's fire. They moved slowly through the valley, boots sinking gently into soft soil and fallen leaves, each step deliberate. Feeling the subtle texture of moss, the resistance of damp earth, and the faint warmth lingering in sunlit stones, as if the land remembered the care of hands long past. A thin mist drifted through the hollow, curling around tree trunks and low shrubs, and the wanderers inhaled the moist, earthy aroma, tasting faint sweetness of frost-touched moss, while sunlight filtered softly through branches, casting delicate patterns across the forest floor in pale, liquid gold. The first wanderer paused beside a shallow stream, letting fingers skim the smooth, water-worn stones. Feeling the cool, flowing resistance of water and inhaling its mineral scent, while the sound of gentle ripples carried across the valley, a soft, patient melody accompanying their quiet movement. Their companion knelt beside a small cluster of wildflowers, brushing gloved hands along petals damp with morning dew, inhaling the faint, sweet perfume that mingled subtly with pine, earth, and moss, while sunlight illuminated the tiny blooms, as if the grove itself held memory of countless seasons. The valley deepened into a gentle slope where ancient trees clustered, their trunks thick with moss and faint resin, and the wanderers moved among them with reverent attention, feeling the textured bark beneath fingertips, inhaling the complex, calming scent of wood, moisture, hay, and lingering sunlight captured in leaves. Above, the sky shifted from pale silver to soft rose, and birds awoke with tender, deliberate songs that vibrated through air and branches, mingling with a subtle hum of insects, and the wanderers paused, listening to this quiet, layered symphony, feeling their own hearts align with a gentle rhythm. They followed the stream upstream, tracing its slow, reflective path over smooth stones and shallow pools. Feeling the soft pressure of water against fingertips and the cool mist brushing cheeks, while the sunlight glinted faintly in scattered droplets, each a miniature reflection of patient illumination. The first wanderer picked up a feather lying among moss, delicate and downy, lifting it carefully and letting it brush gloved hands. Inhaling faintly musky scent, feeling a quiet connection to unseen creatures, and sensing the continuity of life that flowed gently through every nook and fold of the forest. The second wanderer traced a gnarled root rising from the forest floor, feeling its ridges and smooth curves under gloved fingers, inhaling the faint, earthy aroma clinging to its surface, and noted how time had shaped textures with slow, deliberate patience. A mirror of the care they gave to flame and memory alike. Sunlight softened further as drifting clouds filtered the warmth into diffused gold, touching leaves, stones, and the wanderer's shoulders with gentle insistence, while the air carried a faint coolness, a whisper of approaching evening, reminding them that light was both fragile and precious, requiring attention and slow, deliberate presence. They discovered a small clearing where stones formed a rough circle, moss growing between cracks, and the wanderers knelt to brush fingers over surfaces. Feeling faint warmth from sunlight retained in stone, inhaling subtle aromas of earth and resin, sensing that even silence in such places carried memory of care and attention. A soft rustle among leaves drew their attention to a distant hare, still and watchful, its fur damp with dew, and the wanderers observed quietly, inhaling the subtle scent of wet grass, moss, and animal musk, feeling the delicate presence of life moving invisibly through the morning, parallel to their own deliberate journey. They walked with measured steps along the stream, feeling smooth stones beneath boots, inhaling scents of wet earth and faint smoke. While branches brushed shoulders and hair, the forest's texture a tapestry of rough bark, delicate moss, and cool, shifting air. A quiet meditation on movement, perception, and presence. The first wanderer knelt to examine a patch of mushrooms clustered in damp soil, tracing their silky, moist surfaces and inhaling the faint, sweet aroma of hidden life. While sunlight glinted off tiny droplets resting on caps, illuminating minute details often overlooked by hurried eyes. The second wanderer paused at a moss-covered mound, resting gloved hands on cool, soft surfaces and inhaling faint, earthy perfume mingled with sunlight, smoke, and pine. Feeling the rhythm of the forest pulse gently through palms, a subtle resonance connecting hand, land, and lingering warmth. Above, shadows lengthened as sunlight waned and the wanderers adjusted pace. Noticing the interplay of amber warmth and cool gray shade, feeling the subtle drop in air temperature, and inhaling the delicate mingling of frost, moss, and damp wood. A slow, immersive reflection of the day's gentle unfolding. They followed the stream to a small pool where water rippled softly over stones, reflecting muted light and shifting clouds. And the wanderers crouched to touch the cool surface, feeling its smooth pressure. Inhaling the faint mineral temps and observing tiny eddies that captured droplets in delicate, transient patterns. The first wanderer lifted a small twig, brushing it along dry moss. Feeling its brittle texture and faint moisture, and carefully laid it atop a smooth stone, noting the contrast of textures, subtle warmth of sunlight, and lingering cool from shaded moss, a quiet meditation in tactile awareness. The second wanderer adjusted posture, letting the warmth of diffused sunlight brush face and hands. Inhaling the mingled scents of wet earth, pine, moss, and lingering smoke, feeling the delicate balance of warmth and cool that underscored the patient rhythm of their movement through forest and stream. A soft breeze passed through, lifting hair and clothing, rustling leaves with delicate insistence. And the wanderers paused to synchronize breaths with its motion, inhaling faint sweetness of dew and pine, feeling the intimate connection between air, sound, scent, and presence in the gentle, quiet landscape around them. They discovered another stone circle, partially hidden by ferns and moss. And the wanderers knelt to trace edges with fingertips, inhaling the faint warmth of sun-retained stone and earthy scent of moss. Sensing in tactile memory a continuity of attention, devotion, and presence that bridged unseen generations. Sunlight waned further into soft gold, blending with faint shadows, and the wanderers gathered small twigs and dry moss with careful hands, inhaling subtle fragrances and feeling textures under gloved fingers. Preparing for the evening act of sustaining light as night approached with slow, patient inevitability. They placed gathered kindling in careful arrangements atop flat stones, adjusting small twigs and leaves, inhaling faint smoke and earthy aromas. Feeling warmth from sun-kissed stones seep gently into palms, and watched as thin curls of flame might later rise. A delicate act bridging morning's quiet beauty with night's patient shadows. The first wanderer paused to observe light flickering on moss, stone, and water, inhaling the complex blend of scents carried on soft wind. And the second watched ripples in the stream catch diffused sunlight, each small reflection a miniature illumination, echoing the care they would devote to tending flame in hours to come. A faint bird call echoed through distant branches, and the wanderers paused to listen, inhaling the crisp aroma of cooling air and damp soil, feeling the rhythm of life continuing subtly beyond their immediate presence, and sensing in quiet observation the same vigilance that guided their tending of light against encroaching night. The first wanderer touched smooth stone and soft moss in tandem, inhaling faint warmth, subtle smoke, and the sweetness of damp earth, feeling continuity of touch and memory across space and time, while the second carefully adjusted moss and twigs, attuning to textures, scents, and presence in deliberate, meditative rhythm. As sunlight softened into pale rose, shadows deepened gently, and the wanderers prepared their gathered twigs for flame, inhaling mingled warmth, smoke, pine, and earth, feeling subtle heat and cool in tandem, and sensing the delicate, perceived quiet duty of sustaining illumination, a ritual extending from morning into approaching night. They knelt in gentle preparation, arranging kindling carefully on flat stones. Inhaling the mingled scent of moisture, earth, moss, and faint smoke, while the wind stirred lightly, brushing hair, clothing, and firewood. And the first flickers of light promised warmth against the vast, patient dark that would soon enfold the valley. And so, the wanderers remained, tending collected twigs, stones, and moss in quiet anticipation of night, inhaling scents, tracing textures, and observing light's subtle interplay with shadow, knowing that the patient care of hands, breath, and presence could preserve illumination against the endless rhythm of approaching darkness. The wanderers entered a deeper forest where sunlight filtered sparingly through dense canopy, and the air felt cooler, carrying the faint scent of damp moss, pine, and earth, brushing softly against skin as each step pressed gently into a floor of needles and leaves. Shadows stretched long across roots and stones, curling with quiet patience, while the wanderers moved slowly, tracing textures beneath gloved fingers, inhaling the subtle aromas of resin, wet soil, and lingering warmth from distant sunlight, feeling an intimate, tactile connection to the patient pulse of the forest. A stream whispered through the hollow, clear and deliberate, threading over smooth stones and around fallen branches, and the wanderers knelt to touch the water, feeling its silky coolness against palms and inhaling its faint mineral temps. A quiet reminder of persistence flowing silently through time. They paused beside a mossy boulder, gloved hands brushing soft green surfaces, inhaling the damp, earthy scent, and feeling the faint heat lingering from sunlight, noticing the delicate patterns of lichen, frost, and stone, and sensing the slow artistry that time had left etched across the landscape. Above, the canopy shifted subtly with gentle wind, rustling leaves in soft murmurs, and the wanderers inhaled the faint sweetness of pine and the cooler hint of shaded air, feeling the interplay of light and shadow across cheeks, shoulders, and hands, a gentle rhythm attuning them to the forest's quiet pulse. A small bird landed on a low branch, shaking dew from feathers in delicate motion, and the wanderers observed without movement, inhaling the faint, musky scent of its wet plumage, noting the subtle vibration of life that thrived invisibly through branches, soil, and moss between each careful step. The first wanderer traced fingers along gnarled roots, feeling ridges, smooth curves, and faint moisture, inhaling the layered scent of earth and wood, sensing the slow accumulation of time in each texture, and understanding the forest's quiet patience mirrored their own deliberate vigilance over flame and light. Sunlight flickered through gaps in the canopy, pooling on stones and moss in pale, shifting gold. And the second wanderer knelt to adjust a fallen twig, feeling its brittle texture, inhaling faint, earthy sweetness, and noting the way light caught tiny droplets on leaves like miniature mirrors suspended in delicate equilibrium. They followed the stream upstream, where shallow pools reflected faint, shifting sky, and the wanderers crouched to run gloved fingers along smooth stones, feeling subtle resistance of water and inhaling the mingled scents of mineral, earth, and the faint warmth carried through flowing currents. A meditation in tactile observation. The first wanderer discovered a feather among damp leaves, delicate and soft, lifting it gently to brush against hands, inhaling the subtle musky scent, and sensing the quiet passage of unseen birds. The continuity of life that threaded through every fold of forest, stone, and water beneath patient skies. A faint rustle drew attention to a distant hare, still and cautious, its damp fur brushed by morning dew, and the wanderers observed without movement, inhaling faint hints of wet grass and forest, sensing the grace and quiet attentiveness that moved through the valley parallel to their own deliberate rhythm. They walked slowly over moss and fallen needles, feeling textures shift beneath boots, inhaling scents of pine, damp soil, and faint smoke from distant hearths, while branches brushed lightly against shoulders, hair, and clothing, a gentle conversation of touch, scent, and motion threading them seamlessly into the forest's quiet existence. The second wanderer paused at a small mound of moss and lichen, gloved hands brushing soft surfaces, inhaling earth's fragrance mingled with faint resin, while the first observed light shifting through leaves, noting subtle interplay of warmth and coolness. A careful meditation on textures, scent, and the patience required to maintain presence. Above, the sky shifted from soft gold to muted lavender as afternoon deepened and shadows lengthened slowly across roots, stones, and moss, brushing with deliberate subtlety against the wanderer's skin while they adjusted pace. Inhaling the cooling air mingled with lingering sunlight and faint smoke, a sensory meditation of transition. They came to a shallow pool where water rippled over smooth stones, reflecting muted light and drifting clouds, and the wanderers crouched, running gloved fingers across its surface, feeling the smooth resistance and inhaling faint mineral temps, while delicate eddies held suspended droplets that captured fragile light with patient, transient grace. The first wanderer lifted a small twig and brushed it along damped moss, feeling textures contrast between brittle wood and soft green cushion, inhaling faint earthy warmth, while the second observed sunlight glinting off water droplets. Miniature reflections that echoed the careful tending of flame they would undertake in approaching darkness. A gentle breeze lifted hair and clothing, rustling leaves with tender insistence, and the wanderers inhaled deeply, feeling air carry faint sweetness of dew, moss, and pine, sensing the quiet balance of warmth and cool, movement and stillness, and aligning breath with forest rhythm in a meditation of attentiveness and care. They discovered a partially hidden stone circle, moss-filled gaps soft beneath gloved hands, and the wanderers knelt to trace edges, inhaling faint warmth from sun-warmed stone mingled with earth and moss, sensing continuity across generations and the silent passage of hands that had tended flame and light in this place long ago. Sunlight faded toward pale rose, blending with soft shadows, and the wanderers gathered small twigs, dry moss, and brittle leaves with careful hands, inhaling subtle fragrance, feeling textures beneath fingertips, and preparing for the evening ritual of tending light, a patient bridge between the day's quiet beauty and the encroaching night. They placed kindling carefully atop flat stones, adjusting twigs and moss with deliberate touch, inhaling mingled smoke, earth, and pine, while faint heat from sun-retained stones brushed palms and cheeks, and the first flickers of flame promised warmth against the patient darkness soon to enfold the grove. The first wanderer observed the interplay of firelight on moss, stones, and water, inhaling the mingled scents of smoke, pine, and moist earth, while the second watched ripples in the stream catch fading sunlight, each reflection a miniature illumination echoing vigilance and care sustained across time and place. A distant bird called once, echoing through branches, and the wanderers paused, inhaling crisp evening air mingled with damp soil, noticing the quiet rhythm of life beyond immediate perception, and sensing in observation the same attentiveness that guided their careful tending of light against the patient night. The first traced fingers along stone and moss, inhaling warmth, subtle smoke, and damp earth, sensing tactile memory and continuity, while the second adjusted twigs and moss deliberately, attuning fully to textures, scent, and presence, a slow, meditative practice reflecting devotion, patience, and vigilance in the encroaching twilight. As sunlight waned to lavender and gray, shadows deepened with gentle subtlety, and the wanderers prepared kindling for fire, inhaling mingled warmth, smoke, pine, and earth, feeling heat and coolness in delicate balance, knowing that careful tending preserved illumination in patient harmony with approaching night. They knelt in deliberate preparation, arranging twigs and leaves atop stones, inhaling subtle smoke, moisture, and earthy fragrance, while soft wind brushed hair, clothing, and kindling, and the first sparks promised gentle warmth against the vast dark, where patient vigilance sustained light in quiet communion with forest and valley. And so the wanderers remained, tending gathered twigs, moss, and stones in anticipation of night, inhaling scents, tracing textures, observing light and shadow, knowing that the patient care of hands, breath, and presence could preserve illumination against the endless, encroaching rhythm of ancient nightfall. The wanderers moved deeper into the forest, where shadows thickened and sunlight barely reached the ground, brushing softly over moss-covered stones and fallen needles, while the air held a delicate chill and the faint scent of earth, pine, and lingering warmth from distant fires. Branches swayed gently overhead, their leaves rustling in soft, intermittent murmurs, and the wanderers inhaled the damp, earthy aroma, feeling subtle vibrations in the air as it shifted across cheeks and hands, connecting them to the quiet rhythm of the ancient woods. They paused beside a slow-moving stream, water slipping over rounded stones with muted, deliberate murmurs, and the wanderers traced gloved fingers along smooth surfaces, inhaling the faint mineral scent and cool dampness. A quiet meditation on motion, texture, and the soft persistence of flowing life. The first wanderer knelt beside a mossy root, brushing fingertips across its rough, resilient surface, inhaling earthy aroma mingled with faint resin, and noticing the subtle pulse of life beneath moss and bark, a quiet reminder of patience and slow continuity through time. Sunlight filtered in sparse golden beams, illuminating delicate ferns and glistening dew, and the second wanderer paused to touch leaves, feeling the cool, soft texture beneath gloved fingers, inhaling the faint, sweet fragrance of moisture, pine, and earth mingling in the gentle hush of the forest. They moved along the stream, boots pressing softly into damp soil and fallen needles, feeling textures shift beneath each step and inhaling the layered aroma of moss, wet bark, and faint smoke, while the forest's quiet presence brushed against every shoulder and cheek with subtle insistence. A small bird landed on a low branch nearby, shaking dew from feathers in precise, delicate motion, and the wanderers observed silently, inhaling the musky scent of damp plumage and noticing the patient rhythm of life threading invisibly through leaves, moss, and stones between each careful step. The first wanderer traced fingers along a gnarled root, feeling ridges, smooth curves, and faint moisture, inhaling the scent of earth, resin, and sun-warmed moss, and sensing in tactile memory the patient artistry of time and the enduring attentiveness of all life-sustaining light and presence. They followed the stream toward a small pool where water rippled over stones, reflecting dimming light and drifting shadows, and the second wanderer crouched to touch the surface, feeling subtle pressure and coolness beneath gloved hands, inhaling the faint mineral aroma mingled with moss and forest air. The wanderers paused at a fallen log covered in soft moss and lichen, running hands along textures, inhaling earthiness and faint resin, and noting how time shaped every curve, crack, and subtle indentation. A quiet testament to the forest's slow patience and the tender care of unseen passing life. Sunlight waned into muted rose and pale lavender, brushing scattered patches of ground in soft warmth, while shadows deepened across roots, stones, and moss, and the wanderers adjusted pace, inhaling cooling air mingled with lingering warmth. A slow meditation in balance, movement, and gentle awareness of surroundings. They came to a small stone circle, partially hidden by ferns, moss, and leaf litter, and the wanderers knelt to brush gloved fingers along worn edges, inhaling faint warmth retained in sun-warmed stones, and sensing continuity of attention across generations who had tended light with similar care and devotion. A faint rustle among leaves revealed a distant hare, still and watchful, fur damp with dew, and the wanderers observed quietly, inhaling faint earthy sweetness and subtle musk, noting the quiet attentiveness of life threading through every shadow, root, and fold of the valley as they moved with careful reverence. The first wanderer lifted a small feather resting among moss, delicate and soft. Letting it brush across gloved hands, inhaling faint musky scent, and sensing continuity between forest, animals, and themselves. A quiet reminder of patient observation and the invisible rhythm sustaining light and presence alike. The second wanderer crouched beside a cluster of mushrooms, brushing fingertips along silky, damp caps, inhaling faint, earthy aroma mingled with resin and soft sunlight, and feeling subtle moisture and texture beneath gloves. A quiet communion with forest life unfolding unnoticed beneath canopy and shadow. Above, the sky deepened to muted violet as twilight approached, and the forest thickened, branches and leaves brushing cool air across faces, while the wanderers inhaled slowly, letting textures, scents, and shadowed light settle into body and mind, a meditative attunement to the quiet pulse of the woods. They followed the stream to a small waterfall, where water fell in silver threads into a shallow pool, mist rising and brushing cheeks and hands with cool insistence, mingling with fading warmth of sunlight. While the wanderers observed, inhaling scents of moss, stone, and water in patient stillness, the first wanderer traced gloved fingers along wet stones beside the pool, feeling smoothness, cool moisture, and faint vibrations from flowing water, inhaling faint mineral and earthy aroma, and noting how each ripple caught light, subtle and transient, echoing the patient vigilance required to sustain illumination against nightfall. A soft breeze stirred branches overhead, lifting hair, clothing, and smoke from distant embers, carrying faint sweetness of dew, pine, and moss, and the wanderers inhaled in slow, deliberate rhythm, aligning breath with motion, presence, and the quiet, layered rhythm of the valley unfolding under dimming light. They discovered a patch of sunken stones, worn smooth by rain and wind, and knelt to trace edges with gloved fingers, inhaling faint warmth mingled with earth and resin, sensing how time and careful attention had shaped each surface, echoing the careful tending of light that defined their patient vocation. Shadows deepened gradually, folding across moss, roots, and stone, brushing soft coolness against cheeks and hands, while the wanderers prepared small twigs, leaves, and moss for flame, inhaling mingled scents of moisture, earth, and faint smoke, feeling textures beneath fingertips and the subtle warmth retained in sun-kissed surfaces. The first wanderer arranged kindling atop flat stones with deliberate care, adjusting twigs and leaves to ensure airflow, inhaling faint smoke mingled with moss, pine, and damp earth, while the second crouched to observe subtle reflections of fading light on water, echoing careful vigilance in miniature and grand scale alike. A distant owl called once resonant and slow, rolling across trees and ridges, and the wanderers paused, inhaling crisp air mixed with faint, earthy sweetness, feeling the quiet rhythm of life beyond immediate perception, a subtle echo of the same patience that guided tending a fire against approaching night. They knelt together at the stone circle, hands poised over twigs and moss, inhaling faintly smoky, earthy aromas, observing subtle interplay of shadows and light as first sparks promised gentle warmth, and sensing in every texture, scent, and motion the delicate balance of patience, devotion, and quiet presence. The first wanderer brushed gloved hands along moss, feeling softness and slight moisture, inhaling layered aromas of earth, pine, and faint smoke, while the second adjusted twigs carefully, noting subtle warmth from sun-warmed stone, a deliberate, measured act, bridging days, retreating light, and patient care of nightfall illumination. Above, the sky deepened to violet and silver, stars beginning to pierce twilight veil, reflecting faintly in rippling pools, and the wanderers inhaled slowly, sensing continuity between distant celestial light and the fragile glow they would nurture, a quiet resonance across space, time, and patient vigilance in shadowed forest. They tended small twigs and moss with attentive hands, inhaling mingled scents and feeling textures under gloved fingers, watching faint smoke curl and light dance across stones and water, and understood that the patient preservation of illumination required presence, observation, and quiet communion with the world's enduring pulse. As darkness settled fully, the wanderers adjusted kindling, inhaling subtle warmth, smoke, moss, and earthy fragrance, feeling cooling night air against cheeks, hands, and shoulders, and observing interplay of flame, stone, and shadow, a quiet meditation in attentiveness and devotion to light amid encroaching ancient nightfall. And so the firekeepers remained, kneeling beside prepared twigs, moss, and stones, inhaling scents, tracing textures, and observing light, knowing that careful, patient presence could sustain illumination in harmony with the forest, stream, and valley, a gentle, enduring sentinel against the endless rhythm of approaching darkness. The wanderers moved slowly through the forest as night deepened, shadows curling over moss, roots, and stone, while the cool air carried faint scents of damp earth, pine, and lingering smoke, brushing softly across cheeks and hands with deliberate, gentle insistence. They paused beside a narrow stream, water gliding over smooth stones in patient murmurs, and the wanderers ran gloved fingers along its cool, slick surface, inhaling mineral temps mingled with moss and earth, feeling the subtle pulse of life flowing quietly through the valley. The first wanderer knelt to brush moss along a gnarled root, feeling its rough and soft textures under fingertips, inhaling faint earthy sweetness mingled with pine, and sensing the patient shaping of time and the forest's quiet artistry in every curve and ridge. A pale moon rose slowly above the treetops, casting silver shadows over branches and stones, and the second wanderer tilted head to observe soft patterns of light and dark, inhaling the cool, slightly fragrant air and feeling presence gently settle across shoulders, hands, and cheeks. They followed the stream upstream, boots pressing softly into damp soil and fallen leaves, noting textures and subtle variations beneath each step, inhaling scents of wet bark, moss, and pine, and feeling the patient rhythm of water and wind synchronize with their own measured movements. A distant owl called once, slow and resonant, and the wanderers paused to listen, inhaling the crisp night air mingled with faint smoke, feeling the vibrations ripple softly through chest and fingertips, a quiet echo of vigilance and patience carried through unseen valleys and shadowed groves. The first wanderer discovered a small patch of mushrooms, gloved fingers brushing smooth, moist caps, inhaling faint earthy aroma mingled with resin and moss, while sunlight lingering from twilight had faded into silvery moonlight, and they felt a delicate communion with life often unnoticed beneath trees and stones. They moved along a gentle slope where roots twisted across the ground, feeling textures beneath gloves and boots, inhaling scents of frost, moss, and damp earth, while branches brushed shoulders lightly, carrying with them whispers of wind, a soft, persistent reminder that presence was as vital as the light they tended. The second wanderer knelt beside a moss-covered boulder, feeling its cool, soft surface under hands, inhaling faint warmth retained from daylight, earthiness, and subtle resin, and noticing small traces of dew and lichen as if the forest itself had recorded the passing of hours in tactile memory. Above, the night deepened to violet and silver, stars beginning to pierce shadowed canopy, and the wanderers inhaled slowly, feeling subtle shifts in temperature and air movement, sensing delicate patterns of light reflected in water and stone, a quiet meditation on presence, patience, and the enduring rhythm of nature. They arrived at a shallow pool where the stream settled, water rippling over smooth stones in muted reflection, and the first wanderer crouched to trace fingertips along its surface, feeling the silky resistance, inhaling mineral and earthy scent, and noticing subtle eddies that captured fragments of silver moonlight. The second wanderer paused to adjust twigs and leaves scattered along the forest floor, inhaling faint, smoky warmth from distant fires, moss, pine, and wet earth, feeling textures shift beneath gloved fingers. a patient act that mirrored the delicate attentiveness they offered to light against encroaching darkness. A fox passed silently along a distant ridge, fur-brushing dew-laden grass, and the wanderers watched without movement, inhaling faint, musky scent, sensing the graceful vigilance that threaded through unseen creatures, and noticing how life in every shadow responded gently to wind, light, and patient, deliberate movement. They paused at a small stone circle partially hidden by ferns and moss, kneeling to trace edges with gloved fingers, inhaling faint warmth mingled with earthy aroma, noting the gentle interplay of shadow and faint moonlight, and sensing the continuity of hands long gone who had tended flame and memory in this place. The first wanderer gathered small twigs and dry moss, feeling textures under fingertips, inhaling subtle fragrance of damp earth, resin, and faint smoke, arranging each piece carefully atop flat stones, preparing for the ritual of illumination that would soon awaken fragile warmth against nightfall's patient expanse. The second wanderer observed ripples in the shallow pool, watching pale moonlight glint on water, inhaling cool air mixed with earthy aroma, and noting how small reflections captured fleeting light, echoing the delicate attention required to preserve flame. A miniature reminder of the careful vigilance that defined their work. A soft breeze lifted hair and clothing, rustling leaves with tender insistence, and the wanderers inhaled in quiet rhythm, sensing the delicate balance between warmth and cool, movement and stillness, aligning breath with the forest's subtle pulse and the faintly glowing light that would soon be tended with care. They knelt at the stone circle together, gloved hands poised over twigs and moss, inhaling faint smoke, earthy scent, and cooling air, feeling textures shift beneath fingertips, and observing interplay of shadow, stone, and first flickers of flame, a quiet meditation in attentiveness and devotion against night's deepening darkness. The first wanderer brushed moss and lichen along the edges of the circle, feeling softness, subtle moisture, and faint warmth from stones, inhaling faintly smoky, earthy fragrance, while the second adjusted kindling carefully, noting subtle movement of air, light, and temperature. A deliberate act blending ritual with patient observation of their surroundings. Above, the sky deepened into violet and indigo, stars brightening faintly in patches of clearing, and the wanderers inhaled slowly, sensing continuity between distant celestial illumination and fragile glow of the fire to come, a quiet resonance linking vigilance, patient presence, and delicate stewardship across space, time, and shadowed forest. They observed smoke curling gently from scattered twigs, inhaling mingled scent of moss, pine, damp earth, and faint warmth, feeling textures beneath gloved hands, while wind stirred lightly, brushing cheeks, clothing, and small twigs, and they understood that preservation of light required slow, measured attention, patience, and gentle alignment with the forest. The first wanderer adjusted twigs atop flat stones, inhaling subtle fragrances and noticing faint warmth radiating from nearby moss, while the second observed small glimmers of reflected moonlight on rippling water. A quiet reminder that illumination could exist both in small, deliberate flame and subtle interplay of light across shadowed surfaces. A distant owl called once, slow and sonorous, and the wanderers paused to listen, inhaling crisp air and faint earthiness, feeling vibration ripple through chest and fingertips, a gentle echo of vigilance that echoed both in forest and within themselves, sustaining quiet attention as night deepened around them. They traced fingers along moss, stone, and twigs with care, inhaling faint warmth, smoke, and earthy fragrance, feeling textures shift beneath gloves, and observed interplay of shadow, moonlight, and first flickers of flame, knowing patient presence, attentive breath, and deliberate motion could sustain illumination against encroaching darkness. The forest deepened into near total shadow, and the wanderers prepared kindling carefully, inhaling faint smoke, moss, earth, and pine, feeling textures beneath gloved fingers, noting subtle warmth from stones, air pressure changes, and sound of distant stream. A meditation in attentive stewardship of light, shadow, and gentle rhythm of night. Above, stars shimmered faintly through gaps in canopy, reflecting softly in pools and dew, and the wanderers inhaled slowly, feeling quiet resonance between celestial points, fragile flame, and attentive presence. A subtle bridge between infinite night and patient guardianship over fire's enduring light. They tended twigs and moss deliberately, inhaling scents, adjusting placements with gloved hands, observing interplay of smoke, shadow, and faint glow, knowing that careful attention, presence, and observation formed a continuum of care stretching across forest, valley, and night, preserving warmth and illumination for the hours yet to come. And so the firekeepers remained, kneeling beside carefully arranged kindling, inhaling scents of earth, pine, and smoke, tracing textures, observing faint flickers, and sustaining light with patient devotion. A quiet vigil against endless nightfall, where attention, presence, and care wove together to preserve warmth, memory, and enduring illumination. The fire burned low, embers glowing with soft crimson light, and the wanderers leaned closer, palms outstretched, feeling the delicate warmth brush over chilled skin, as the night pressed down with deeper shadows and winds carrying scents of pine, moss, and fading smoke. Above them, stars multiplied across the indigo sky, delicate sparks scattered endlessly, their shimmer reflected in the wanderer's eyes, while the forest hushed in reverence, each branch, leaf, and stone holding stillness as though listening for the quiet rhythm of fire's patient breathing. One wanderer shifted a small twig into the coals, the gesture slow and careful, hearing the faint crackle as heat spread, inhaling the mingled aromas of resin and charred wood, noticing how every sound seemed magnified in the still, waiting silence. The second wanderer traced fingertips over the rough edge of a nearby stone, feeling its cool grain beneath gloves, noticing the subtle dampness of night dew, and sensing how even stone carried memory of centuries, holding its place as fire's steady companion. They sat close to the circle, their shadows dancing faintly along moss and roots, each movement softened by flame and moonlight, while the surrounding forest seemed to lean inward, gathering around them in unseen forms, drawn by the persistence of light against darkness. The first wanderer drew a breath of cold night air, lungs filling with sharp clarity, tasting the mixture of smoke, pine, and damp soil, feeling how the body responded in quiet rhythm to elements aligned with fire, wind, and earth in silent communion. Beyond the trees, a breeze carried the faint sound of rushing water, its voice weaving through the night, steady and unbroken, and the wanderers closed their eyes briefly, listening to its distant cadence as though it were another flame burning beyond their sight. A single moth fluttered into the fire's glow, wings shimmering like thin parchment, circling with delicate hesitation before vanishing again into shadow, leaving the wanderers to wonder how fragile beings were forever drawn toward warmth, light, and the soft promise of survival. The second wanderer adjusted the fire again, lifting a branch into the coals, watching sparks rise upward like fleeting constellations, inhaling the smoky sweetness that curled gently through the air, and reflecting on how the smallest acts sustained life through unending hours of night. They shared silence between them, eyes fixed on flame and sky, each movement slow and thoughtful, letting the rhythm of crackle, wind, and distant water settle into their bodies, carrying them deeper into the quiet embrace of darkness, gently pierced by fire. The forest stretched outward in infinite shadow, unseen paths weaving through thickets, roots, and ridges, yet here within the circle of light, they felt suspended in time, cocooned by warmth, and connected to the countless keepers who had tended fires before them. The first wanderer placed a hand upon the earth beside the flames, feeling faint vibrations of warmth pulsing downward into soil. Inhaling the mingled scents of ash and moss, and recognizing how fire and ground shared an unspoken dialogue woven through time's deep fabric. An owl called again from afar, voice low and deliberate, and the sound carried across the valley with unhurried weight, echoing in their chests, reminding them that other guardians roamed these lands, each attending to their duties in the endless night. They watched embers shift, glowing brighter where air stirred faintly, and the second wanderer reached forward to stir ashes gently, fingers steady, movements soft, releasing new breath into the heart of flame, and witnessing once more how careful hands prolonged light's fragile endurance. Above, the moon climbed higher, its pale light brushing tree trunks with silver sheen, and the wanderers inhaled its cool fragrance of frost and shadow, sensing how celestial illumination partnered with fire's glow, each balancing the other within the vast chamber of night. The first wanderer unwrapped a small bundle of dried herbs, scattering a pinch into the fire, and fragrant smoke rose in delicate spirals, carrying sharp sweetness of sage and resin, drifting upward to mingle with starlight, a gesture offered as silent devotion to both earth and sky. They leaned back upon their cloaks, eyes tilted toward, constellations shifting slowly, breathing in rhythm with the fire's quiet crackle, and noticing how stars seemed to answer with steady glimmers, as though flame below and light above shared a language unspoken yet deeply understood. The forest floor cooled further, dew settling upon roots and moss, dampness rising faintly into the air, and the wanderers drew their cloaks closer, feeling fabric's rough weave against chilled skin. Comfort found not in resistance, but in surrender to the night's embrace. The second wanderer extended a hand toward the embers, fingers hovering above fragile heat, reflecting on how flame felt both temporary and eternal. Its endurance dependent upon attention, yet its memory living in every star, every heartbeat, every whispered breath of wind. They listened again to the distant water, its voice threading through silence like a hidden companion, reminding them that movement and stillness coexisted, that fire's pulse and river's flow were mirrors of each other, both carrying persistence into the endless span of night. A fox barked once in the distance, the sound sharp yet softened by distance, and the wanderers exchanged glances, eyes reflecting firelight, understanding how creatures carried their own torches of survival, each life a flame moving through shadowed corridors of forest and time. The first wanderer adjusted a log, feeling resistance as it settled, watching sparks leap upward into branches, hearing faint hiss as resin released, and inhaling strong fragrance of charred wood, each sensation anchoring them to presence, reminding them of the delicate threads sustaining warmth. The second wanderer spread moss gently across a stone, smoothing its surface with patient hands, feeling moisture seep into gloves, smelling its earthy freshness rising with warmth of fire, and sensing how care extended beyond flame, touching every element within their small circle. They watched smoke drift upward, curling with elegance into night, tracing invisible paths among branches and stars, carrying with it memory of wood, moss, and herbs, and they imagined these offerings woven into the fabric of sky, where countless fires had once sent prayers. The embers pulsed with a rhythm of their own, glowing deeper where air brushed gently, and the wanderers leaned close, eyes fixed upon shifting coals, entranced by patterns that seemed to mirror constellations, as though stars themselves had descended into Earth's embrace of flame. A deeper stillness fell upon the forest, sounds softening to whispers, air cooling with heavier dew, and the wanderers drew closer together, their breath mingling with smoke and night, while the fire's warmth stood as barrier against the infinite hush pressing inward. They tended the flame again, laying small twigs along its heart, hearing the delicate crackle, inhaling renewed fragrance, and watching light flare gently, carrying reassurance that night could stretch endlessly, yet never fully extinguish the fragile radiance sustained by attentive, patient hands. Above, stars brightened as the moon dipped westward, their light scattering across branches and moss, and the wanderers felt them as companions, ancient watchers who had glimmered over every fire before. Their silent guidance woven into every flicker, every gesture, every breath of care. They leaned against roots of an old oak, rough bark pressing into their backs, listening to its deep stillness, inhaling faint wood scent mingled with smoke, and sensing how trees themselves were silent witnesses, recording every flame, every song, every vigil beneath their canopy. The fire burned lower once more, embers glowing steady, and the wanderers placed last twigs with quiet hands, feeling satisfaction settle within their bodies, knowing flame would carry until dawn, its glow a soft bridge between their presence and the coming light. And so they remained, silent guardians beside their fragile circle, breath mingling with smoke, eyes reflecting stars, bodies warmed by persistent flame, their vigil a thread woven into the fabric of night, preserving illumination against endless sky as countless firekeepers had done before them. The embers glowed with steady persistence as the forest hushed into its deepest stillness, and the wanderers leaned close to the fading warmth, feeling the fragile rhythm of fire's breath align gently with their own quiet inhalations beneath the endless stars. The sky above had darkened into its richest indigo, yet hints of subtle change lingered faintly at the horizon, where night seemed to soften its edges, and the wanderers sensed that the slow turning of time carried dawn silently nearer. They sat together, shoulders brushed lightly beneath their cloaks, listening to the fire crackle in subdued tones, smelling the faint mixture of ash, pine, and cooling resin, while the air thickened with dew settling across moss, bark, and stone. One wanderer traced a finger through the soil beside the embers, feeling the cool dampness cling to the glove, imagining how the earth stored memory of every flame tended upon it, carrying warmth deeper than the eye could ever see. The other adjusted a charred branch, watching it collapse inward with a muted sigh, sparks scattering briefly before fading, and they inhaled the sharp smoke rising upward, tasting its bitterness and sweetness mingled, sensing how endings and continuations shared the same fragile moment. Above them, the constellations glimmered in quiet procession, each star steady as a heartbeat, and the wanderers tilted their heads to watch, letting the sky's silent permanence remind them that light was never truly lost, only carried forward in different forms. The night air cooled further, brushing over their cheeks with damp insistence, and the wanderers drew cloaks tighter, feeling the coarse weave against skin, noticing how warmth lingered in small spaces while shadows pressed heavily around, soft as velvet yet endless in their reach. They listened as branches creaked faintly overhead, shifting beneath the weight of dew, and the sound blended with the hush of distant water, the faint whisper of wind, and the subdued breath of fire, creating a chorus both tender and eternal. One wanderer opened a small pouch and scattered dried leaves into the embers, their sharp fragrance rising in thin spirals of smoke, carrying herbal sweetness through the air. A gesture of reverence offered quietly to both night and the unseen dawn awaiting. The other leaned forward to place a hand above the coals, feeling gentle heat radiate outward, the sensation almost like a pulse, steady and enduring. And in that moment they recognized how flame echoed the body's own fragile rhythm of life. A fox moved silently at the edge of shadows, its eyes glinting faintly before slipping away. And the wanderers remained still, breathing deeply, acknowledging the presence of another life that traveled these forests, guided by instincts as old as fire itself. They turned their eyes again to the horizon, where the faintest suggestion of silver hovered beneath the stars, subtle as breath against glass, and they inhaled with slow recognition that night, though vast and infinite, always carried within it the promise of return. The embers shifted, collapsing softly into themselves, their glow pulsing gently like heartbeats fading into slumber, and the wanderers watched closely, knowing that their task was not to resist change, but to carry light long enough for morning to awaken. One wanderer laid a final twig upon the coals. Its surface damp with dew, and they leaned closer, exhaling a steady breath. Watching the flames stir faintly, small threads of orange weaving upward as though responding to patient encouragement and devotion. The other reached into the satchel for a smooth stone kept polished by hand, placing it beside the circle, feeling its coolness meet the warmth of embers. A silent ritual acknowledging how fire and earth together carried balance through endless cycles. They closed their eyes briefly, inhaling deeply through the nose, tasting the layered fragrances of smoke, moss, and damp soil. And within that breath they felt connected to all who had ever guarded flame, a lineage stretching back through countless forgotten nights. The forest seemed to lean nearer as silence grew heavier, as though every root and branch recognized the significance of this hour, the threshold between night's deepest silence and the quiet stirring of day, where keepers bore witness to a fragile transformation. One wanderer rested their hand upon the other's shoulder, a simple gesture of presence, of reassurance. And together they inhaled the cool breath of air moving softly through the canopy, feeling that they were not alone but woven into a greater fabric. Above, the stars shimmered faintly, their brilliance beginning to blur against the softening sky, and the wanderers realized how even the most steadfast lights surrendered gracefully, not with haste, but with gentle transition, teaching through example the art of relinquishment without fear. The embers glowed one last time with concentrated brilliance, their light deeper, richer, before fading to a faint hush, and the wanderers leaned closer, committing the color, the warmth, the fragrance to memory, carrying them as treasures to be tended elsewhere. They wrapped the remaining warmth in silence, watching as smoke curled upward in thinning ribbons, dissolving slowly into the sky. And they felt the texture of ash beneath their gloves, soft as silk, as though the fire had left behind only gentle traces. The second wanderer gathered the ashes carefully, spreading them across moss and roots, returning what had been borrowed, inhaling the earthy fragrance rising as the forest accepted the offering, a quiet act of reciprocity, of balance between what was taken and what endured. The first wanderer tilted their face toward the horizon again, where silver now deepened into pale gray, dissolving stars, softening edges of trees. And they inhaled with wonder, feeling how light returned not as sudden conquest, but as patient, graceful unfolding. The forest responded slowly, leaves catching faint glimmers of gray light, dew shimmering more distinctly, branches revealing their shapes. And the wanderers sat in reverent silence, feeling how the world shifted from hidden mystery to gentle unveiling, without breaking the deep stillness. They touched hands briefly, grounding themselves in presence, and listened to the first bird's tentative call from afar, a fragile note trembling into the air, signaling that the long vigil had reached its quiet conclusion, and dawn carried the flame forward in new form. The embers cooled fully, their glow sinking into memory, yet warmth lingered faintly in the soil, in the wanderer's breath, in their eyes that reflected both night's mystery and dawn's approach. And they understood that fire lived on wherever light found a vessel. They rose slowly, cloaks brushing dew-damp earth, inhaling the crisp fragrance of morning mingled with smoke, and they looked once more upon the circle of stones, acknowledging its role as cradle of warmth, its patience in holding space for their guardianship of flame. As they stepped away, the horizon bloomed with pale gold, washing tree trunks in tender light, dissolving shadows into color. And the wanderers walked with slow steps, carrying within them the memory of fire's glow and the stillness of night now gently passing. Their footprints pressed lightly into damp soil, filling quickly with dew, and behind them the forest returned to its quiet rhythm, holding ash, smoke, and silence as testimony, while ahead stretched the new day, waiting to receive what they carried in silence. And so they moved forward, steady and unhurried, bearing within them the unbroken chain of light, their vigil completed, yet never ended. For every flame carried onward belonged not to them alone. but to the countless keepers who guarded before and who would follow. The first light touched the forest softly, gliding across damp leaves and tracing silver outlines upon the moss, and the wanderers paused within its glow, breathing deeply as morning revealed itself, not with haste, but with the tenderness of unveiling. Their cloaks carried the scent of smoke still woven into the fabric, mingling with dew's cool fragrance, and as the air warmed, the mingled aromas rose gently, reminding them that night's vigil remained present even as the day unfurled. The forest seemed to exhale as the sun rose, shadows dissolving into delicate shades of green, trunks awakening into warm tones, and the wanderers felt themselves walking within, a tapestry slowly stitched together by light passing gently across every surface. Birdsong unfolded gradually, not in chorus, but in scattered notes drifting from branch to branch, each voice trembling with tentative brightness. And the wanderers listened as though each sound were a flame itself, igniting morning with fragile yet enduring radiance. The path beneath their feet softened with moisture, soil damp yet yielding, and their steps pressed lightly, leaving impressions filled quickly with glittering dew, as if the earth itself moved to erase their presence while still holding memory of their passing. They paused near a stream where water caught morning light in 1,000 shifting fragments, its cool breath rising toward them, and they bent low, touching fingers to the surface, feeling the chill ripple through skin and into quiet marrow. One wanderer cupped hands to drink, tasting the metallic tang softened by moss and stone, and the other followed, both feeling the liquid slide cool and clear down their throats, carrying freshness that mingled with lingering smoke upon their tongues. The fire was behind them now, its ashes absorbed by soil and roots. Yet they carried warmth within memory, and as the stream refreshed their bodies, they recognized the same balance, that where flame ended, water continued with quiet constancy. They rested by the bank, cloaks spread upon stones, still cool with night, and they watched insects rise slowly from grasses, wings catching early light, moving delicately as though morning itself were a fragile thing requiring gentleness from every creature. The breeze shifted lightly, carrying fragrance of pine and damp bark, and their hair moved with its rhythm, strands catching faint glimmers. And they inhaled deeply, sensing that even the wind bore a kind of flame, unseen yet vital, invisible yet sustaining. From across the stream, a deer lifted its head, ears twitching, eyes reflecting pale gold. And for a long moment, wanderers and animal regarded one another silently, both sharing the same fragile awareness of being held within the same morning light. The deer moved slowly away into trees, hooves pressing softly upon damp soil, leaving no sound but the faint rustle of leaves. And the wanderers felt the encounter settle into memory, as quiet and enduring as embers buried beneath cooling ash. They rose again, brushing dew from cloaks, and continued along the winding path, where light spilled gently through branches in shifting patterns, dappling their faces and hands, reminding them that the day itself was a fire, diffused yet unceasing. The warmth grew gradually, seeping through fabric, soft against skin, never harsh. And the wanderers walked slowly, savoring the delicate change, each step guided by the rhythm of morning, where time stretched like woven thread, even and without interruption. They touched the trunks of passing trees, fingers brushing rough bark softened by lichen, feeling how each surface stored the coolness of night within its layers, and they marveled at how both fire and forest remembered what passed through them. Overhead, branches formed shifting mosaics of light and shadow, and as they walked beneath, the wanderers felt like figures moving within ancient stained glass, each ray and each leaf composing patterns that existed only for a heartbeat before dissolving again. They passed meadows where grasses glistened with dew, bending beneath the weight of droplets, and each blade shimmered like glass threads woven upon an unseen loom, the meadow appearing as though countless tiny flames bent together into softest radiance. Their footsteps brushed lightly against the grasses, sending dew cascading in silver arcs, cool drops striking their boots, darkening fabric. And the wanderers laughed softly, not with sound, but with breath, releasing warmth into morning air that carried it gently away. They continued onward, not toward destination, but through presence itself. Their journey less about distance than about the rhythm of light unfolding. And within that slow movement, they sensed that guardianship extended beyond fire, into every quiet noticing of world's radiance. A flock of birds lifted suddenly into the sky, wings flashing pale gold, and the wanderers tilted heads to watch them scatter. Their flight weaving threads across blue horizon, ephemeral yet eternal, like sparks carried upward upon a breath of flame. They paused to watch until the last bird vanished into distance. Silence returning softly to the meadow. And within that silence they recognized how absence too bore beauty, how the fading of one moment prepared space for another to arrive. The path carried them toward a stand of birches, their white trunks glowing softly in new sun, bark peeling in delicate strips. And the wanderers touched the surfaces gently, feeling papery layers crumble beneath fingers, fragile yet resilient against passing seasons. Here they lingered, cloaks brushing against trunks, listening to the faint rustle of leaves overhead, and they inhaled deeply, breathing the fragrance of bark, resin, and dew, sensing that these trees, like flame, guarded their own silent memory of time endured. One wanderer knelt to gather fallen bark, tucking it carefully into their satchel, not as fuel, but as remembrance. Each piece carrying trace of forest's fireless light, to be kept as symbol that flame and tree alike endured in quiet guardianship. The other leaned against a trunk, feeling its cool solidity press through fabric into back, and they closed eyes, hearing the soft groan of wood in wind, a sound that spoke of centuries of storms endured and mornings witnessed without end. They lingered in the birches until sun climbed higher, warming the crowns of trees, dissolving dew from grass, and they felt the shift as day claimed fullness. Yet even then, its brilliance remained gentle, never shattering the softness of their steps. As they moved on, shadows shortened slightly, paths widening beneath clearer sky, and the wanderers carried with them the sense that day itself was a hearth without walls, its warmth unconfined, its flames stretched across sky, earth, and every quiet being. The memory of night remained, its embers woven into fabric and breath, and the wanderers recognized that their roles stretched beyond darkness into daylight too, for to guard flame meant to see light in every form, hidden or revealed. The air shimmered faintly with insects rising, wings catching light like fragments of glass, and the wanderers walked through their delicate swarms without disturbance, each movement careful, reverent, as though acknowledging that every small flicker was kin to the fire itself. The world brightened fully, yet the wanderers' pace remained slow, measured, attuned to subtle shifts of shadow and sound, and as the day continued unfolding, they carried within them the enduring truth that flame lived not only in night, but within all hours. The sun reached its quiet height above the wandering pair, filling the world with a brilliance that shimmered across every surface. And the air itself seemed to glow, carrying warmth heavy and unbroken across meadow, stone, and tree. Their steps slowed as the day deepened into its fullest blaze. Cloaks pressed against their backs by the stillness of heat, and beads of sweat traced slow lines along their temples, gathering at chins before falling to thirsty earth. The soil beneath their boots had dried. Dark morning dampness lifted into invisible threads of vapor, and each step stirred a faint, powdery haze, rising gently before sinking again, as though the land itself sighed beneath the weight of midday. They sought shade among scattered trees, their branches spread wide like open hands, and the wanderers rested beneath them, lowering themselves onto roots warm from sunlight, backs pressed to trunks that held both cool shadows and echoes of absorbed heat. The air hummed softly, with insects weaving slow arcs above grasses, wings shimmering with a metallic gleam, and their droning song rose and fell with hypnotic rhythm, lulling the wanderers into a stillness that felt as endless as the sky itself. Heat clung to skin like a second garment, damp and heavy. Yet within that thickness, the wanderers felt the presence of flame mirrored, not in flickering sparks, but in the unbroken radiance of a sun refusing to yield or dim. They drew water from their satchel, warm upon their tongues, carrying faint earthy taste of leather and moss. Yet even this simple act held comfort, reminding them that flame and thirst shared kinship. Both consuming, both demanding quiet reverence from those who bore them. Their cloaks spread across the ground like fallen shadows, and they leaned back into the earth, eyes half closed, gazing upward where branches swayed slightly in still air, their leaves trembling as though carrying hidden whispers from a sky too bright to touch. The horizon shimmered with heat, distant fields bending into wavering illusion, and the wanderers observed the mirage with quiet patience, knowing such visions belonged to midday, where the line between real and imagined blurred under the weight of fire carried by the sun. A bird cried out above them, wings catching white light as it circled slowly, and its shadow passed across their faces, fleeting and cool, like the brush of a cloud's hand upon earth. Gentle reminder that all flames had moments of respite. The wanderers remained still, their breathing slow, their bodies surrendering to the warmth that wrapped them. And in that stillness they felt time loosen, each moment blending into another, each heartbeat dissolving into the unhurried rhythm of endless summer hours. The fragrance of dry grass mingled with resin dripping softly from pine, and the wanderers inhaled deeply, each breath heavy with the sweetness of warmed earth, as though the air itself carried memory of countless fires hidden within soil and bark. Their thoughts drifted like smoke, unanchored and soft, touching fragments of nights past when flames flickered against darkness. And they realized that even here, under relentless brightness, they remained keepers of light, for the sun itself was the grandest fire of all. One wanderer traced a hand across the dirt, feeling its dry grit press into skin, and the sensation reminded them of cooled ashes, fragile and grainy, remnants of what once burned, yet still carrying quiet essence of heat held within memory. The other leaned forward, gathering fallen twigs scattered at their feet, brittle from sun and age, and they snapped lightly in hands, the sound crisp and echoing faintly, as though even the smallest fragments remembered fire waiting within their cores. They set the twigs aside, not to kindle flame, but as gentle acknowledgement, knowing that when night returned, they would feed embers again. And so, even beneath midday blaze, their role endured, carried silently in thought and in preparation. A breeze rose suddenly, carrying with it relief that brushed cool fingers across their cheeks, stirring cloaks against their shoulders. And with that movement, the wanderers felt the sky's breath touch them, gentle promise that fire could soothe as much as burn. Shadows shifted slightly beneath trees, stretching longer as the sun began its subtle descent, and the wanderers rose slowly, gathering their things, feeling their bodies heavy yet renewed, ready to continue walking within the radiance that still lingered across land. They stepped back into light, squinting against brilliance, boots pressing upon hardened earth that rang faint beneath their tread. And the world appeared as though glazed, every stone, every blade of grass carrying sheen of gold, drawn from unbroken flame. Their path wound toward a hillside where tall grasses bent beneath heat, their dry stalks rustling faintly with each step, and the sound carried crispness that mirrored fire's own crackling, reminding the wanderers of nights when sparks leaped high against darkness. At the hill's crest, they paused to gaze across vast fields shimmering in sun, horizon stretching endless, sky unbroken and heavy, and they felt themselves small beneath its weight, yet also deeply bound to its ceaseless light and gentle enduring flame. The air grew still again, silence vast, broken only by faint buzzing of insects and distant cry of unseen hawk. And within that stillness, the wanderers recognized the great pause of day, the earth itself holding its breath under fire's gaze. They descended slowly, steps careful against shifting soil, and at the base of the hill they found a grove, its shadows deep and cool, and within its shelter the air softened, carrying fragrance of damp leaves untouched by midday blaze. Here they lingered again, drinking the shade as though it were water, feeling skin cool gradually beneath layers of shadow. And in that gentle refuge they recognized balance, that every flame bore its counterpart, every blaze tempered by quiet darkness. They lay upon the ground, backs against roots, listening to the grove's silence, broken only by the flutter of wings and the creak of branches. And they drifted toward rest, their thoughts slow, dissolving into the unbroken rhythm of day's embrace. Hours passed unnoticed, measured only by the angle of light shifting across branches. And when they stirred, they felt limbs heavy, yet refreshed, as though sleep had woven its softness into them, carrying traces of fire and shadow both. Rising again, they walked onward through the grove, each step carrying them deeper into the embrace of afternoon. And with every movement they carried the awareness that even in silence and stillness, they remained guardians of flame, keepers of enduring light. The sun's brilliance softened slightly as it leaned westward, though its warmth still pressed upon shoulders, and the wanderers moved gently, without haste, guided not by destination but by rhythm of time, surrendering to the endless unfolding of light across sky. And so the day continued, vast and golden. Fire spread wide across horizon, its presence unbroken yet kind, and the wanderers moved within its embrace, carrying embers of night within memory, carrying promise of flame within every quiet step. The sun leaned low upon the horizon, spreading its final warmth across the fields, and the wanderers walked quietly, their steps softened by grasses glowing amber, as though the land itself held flame in every fading blade. Shadows stretched long across the earth, weaving dark rivers between stones and trees. And the wanderers felt the slow turning of the day, each breath carrying them closer toward night, where fire would once again be called to life. The air cooled gradually, carrying scents of pine resin, distant smoke, and crushed grass beneath their boots, and the wanderers inhaled deeply, filling their lungs with the mingled essence of earth's breath and the quiet promise of returning embers. Birdsong softened into silence, the sky deepening toward violet and rose, and a hush spread across the land, as though every living thing paused to watch the sun's descent, surrendering to the arrival of night's endless, embracing veil. They reached a clearing where stones circled a space worn smooth by countless nights of gathering. And the wanderers laid their packs upon the ground, moving with quiet reverence as though preparing a shrine to the memory of flame. Their hands moved gently, arranging twigs and branches with care, each piece placed not for haste but for harmony, and their gestures carried patience born of countless evenings, where the act itself became ritual, binding time into soft continuity. The match of flint upon steel rang faintly, a spark leaping like a star fallen into waiting wood, and the wanderers leaned close, their breath guiding it into life, until faint orange glow unfurled across kindling like dawn returning. The flame grew slowly, licking upward with soft crackle, and its warmth spread in fragile circles, brushing their faces with tenderness, while shadows bent backward, retreating, and night itself seemed to pause, acknowledging the ancient guardianship renewed once more. They sat together before the growing fire, cloaks drawn close, and gazed into its heart, where colors shifted from gold to red to deepening blue, each shade a language of memory, carrying voices of nights long past and yet unforgotten. The forest beyond darkened into silhouettes, trunks standing solemn beneath sky thick with stars, and the fire became their sun within the vastness, its circle of light holding them gently, a small yet enduring defiance against the ancient expanse of night. The air cooled further, crisp against their cheeks, and the wanderers leaned closer, palms extended toward warmth. Feeling the subtle sting of heat upon skin, grateful for the balance, the way fire answered cold with soft and steady resilience. Smoke curled upward in slow spirals, carrying scent of pine, resin, and char, drifting into night sky. And the wanderers watched as it dissolved into stars, merging with constellations. As though their fire spoke quietly with the heavens above. They shared food drawn from satchel, bread dense and cool, softened when warmed beside flame. And as they ate, the taste mingled with smoke and ash, each bite grounding them, binding body and spirit into this moment of gathered light. The fire whispered steadily, each crackle like the turning of pages. And the wanderers listened as though to a story, told not with words, but with sound. A story older than their steps, older than even the memory of sky. They leaned back upon the earth, gazing upward, where stars stretched infinite and unbroken. And in that endless scatter they saw fire's kin. Countless flames burning silently, reminding them that guardianship extended far beyond their circle of warmth. The night deepened, cooler winds drifting through grasses, and the wanderers pulled cloaks tighter, feeling fabric brush against their skin, still scented faintly with smoke from nights past. Each thread woven with memory of countless fires carried across endless miles. One wanderer reached to stir embers, shifting wood with gentle hand, and sparks leaped upward, scattering like fleeting constellations. And for a breath, the line between earth and sky blurred, both carrying flame and patterns, fleeting yet eternal. The other added fresh wood, watching the flame embrace it with eagerness, and they smiled softly, knowing that such small acts sustained light. Each gesture part of unbroken chain stretching back through time where countless hands had once guarded fire. Silence wrapped them gently, broken only by occasional crack of wood, the sigh of breeze and distant call of nightbird. And within that silence they felt held, as though the night itself bowed in quiet reverence to their vigil. Their eyes grew heavy, lulled by warmth and rhythm, yet even as drowsiness pressed upon them, one remained awake, watching flame carefully. For guardianship required constancy, and in that wakefulness they felt deeply the weight and gift of their role. The fire burned steady, its glow painting their faces in shifting light, and within that glow they seemed timeless. Figures bound not to single night, but to endless cycle, where firekeepers endured across centuries, unseen, yet never forgotten. Stars wheeled slowly overhead, marking hours without urgency. And the wanderers drifted between wakefulness and dreams, their breaths rising in rhythm with smoke, their bodies softened by warmth, and the fire's heart steady. Unbroken, holding vigil as night stretched endless. The embers pulsed like living heartbeat, glowing beneath ash, carrying within them promise of dawn. And the wanderers understood that their task was not merely to guard against darkness, but to ensure that light would always return, however faint. As moon rose high, bathing clearing in pale glow, fire and moonlight mingled, each answering the other. And the wanderers felt balance surround them, night not as emptiness, but as vessel, carrying both shadow and flame in equal measure. They whispered softly, voices low, speaking not of journeys yet to come, but of gratitude, of moments gathered in quiet companionship. And their words dissolved into night, carried upward with smoke, as though stars themselves listened and bore their echoes. The fire burned lower, settling into steady bed of embers, yet its warmth remained steady and alive, and the wanderers closed their eyes, trusting that flame would endure, knowing that when morning came, light would rise again from within. Night stretched vast, ancient, unbroken. Yet within its immensity the small circle of fire held strong, and the wanderers rested within its glow. Keepers of light against endless sky, guardians of warmth within silence, bound to their quiet, eternal task. And so they remained, cradled by fire and stars alike. Their vigil woven into fabric of world, and though night seemed endless, flame endured, its glow carrying promise forward, against shadow, against silence, across ages, into dawns still waiting to come.